Chapter 10, Part 2. We're finding an animal right now here. Up from the water to a small pile of sand, then back down to the water, some animal, some kind of water animal that came up to the sand to do what? To do something with the sand, to play, to make a pile of sand. He smiled, city boy, he thought. Oh, you city boy with your city ways. He made a mirror in his mind, a mirror of himself, and saw how he must look. City boy with your city ways, sitting in the sand, trying to read the tracks, not knowing, not understanding. Why would anything wild come up from the water to play in the sand? Not that way. Animals weren't that way. They didn't waste their time. It had come up from the water for an actual reason, a good reason, and he must try to understand the reason. He must change to fully understand the reason himself, or he would not make it. It had to come out of the water for a reason. The reason he thought squatting, the reason had to be to do with a pile of sand. He brushed the top off gently with his hand and found only damp sand. Still, there must be a reason, and he carefully scraped and dug until about 4 inches down, he suddenly came into a small chamber in the cool, damp sand, and there lay eggs, many eggs, almost perfectly round eggs the size of tennis balls, and he laughed because he knew it had been a turtle. He had seen a show on television about sea turtles that came up to beaches to lay their eggs. Food, he thought. More than eggs, more than knowledge, more than anything, these eggs were food. His stomach tightened and rolled and made noise as he looked at the eggs, as if his stomach belonged to somebody else or had seen the eggs with his own eyes and was demanding food. The hunger, always there, had been somewhat controlled and dormant when there was nothing to eat. But with the eggs came the scream to eat. His whole body craved food with such intensity that it quickened his breath. He reached to the nest and pulled the eggs out one at a time. There were 17 of them, each as round as a ball and white. They had leathery shells that gave instead of breaking when he squeezed them. When he had them heaped on the sand in a pyramid, he had never felt so rich somehow. He suddenly realized that he did not know how to eat them. He had a fire, but no way to cook them, no container. And he had never thought of eating raw eggs. He had an Uncle Carter, his father's brother, who always put an egg in a glass of milk and drank it in the morning. Brian had watched him do it once, just once, and when the runny part of the white left the glass and went into his uncle's mouth and down the throat in a single gulp, Brian almost lost everything he had ever seen. Still, he thought, still. As his stomach moved toward his backbone, he became less and less fussy. Some natives in the world ate grasshoppers and ants, and if they could, they'd eat a raw egg. He picked one up and tried to break the shell, but found it surprisingly leathery and tough. Finally, using the hatchet, he sharpened a stick and poked a hole in the egg. He widened the hole with his finger and looked inside. Just an egg. It had a dark yellow yolk and not so much white as he thought there would be, but it was just an egg, a raw egg, and it was food. He looked out to the lake and brought the egg to his mouth, closed his eyes, sucked and squeezed the egg. It had a greasy, almost oily taste, but it was still an egg. His throat tried to throw it back up. His whole body seemed to convulse with it, but his stomach took it, held it, and demanded more. The second egg was easier, and by the third one, he had no trouble at all. It just slid right down. He ate 6 of them, could have easily eaten them all, and had been full, but part of him said to hold back and save the rest. He could not now believe the hunger. The eggs had awakened it fully, roaring, so that it tore him open. After the 6th egg, he ripped the shell open and licked the inside clean, and then went back and ripped open 5 more and licked them out as well, wondered if he could even eat the shells. There must be some food value in them, but when he tried, they were too leathery to chew, and he couldn't get them down. He stood away from the eggs for a moment, literally stood and turned away so that he could not see them. If he looked at them, he would have to eat more. He would store them in the shelter and eat only 1 a day. He fought the hunger down again, controlled it. He would take them now and store them and save them and eat 1 a day, and he realized that as he thought, he had forgotten that they might come. The searchers, surely they would come before he could eat all the eggs at once. He had forgotten to think about them, and that wasn't good. He had to keep thinking of them, because if he forgot and he did not think of them, they might forget about him. And he had to keep hoping. He had to keep hoping. And that's the end of chapter 10.